Hello and welcome to Get Rich Slow, the podcast that challenges a conventional get-rich-quick ideology by exploring what authentic success really means and how you can achieve it. I'm Hannah Martin, the founder of Towns Ladies Club, and today I'm joined by Kara Stamford, strategic marketer and business owner, for an episode on finding customers. Hello, Kara.
Hello, Hannah. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to start by asking a question I ask all my guests, and that is, what does success mean to you?
Success for me is about having clients who leave better off than when they arrived. And that better off can mean a range of things, but one of them is that they understand marketing better, and the things that we have done together, they can see how they can apply it again and again and again and again for the rest of their lives, as long as they need marketing. That's a really key criteria, and whether that's the students I'm teaching qualifications to, or members of the marketing spaces, or clients for strategic marketing. Another key success for me is earning a full-time salary while working part-time. Basically, that's really important. Really, really important. Financial success is important to me, and I know it's not important to everybody, but that is for me. And then my other success criteria is staying sane.
Not always easy to do that way.
It's not, no. Not when you're running a business and a family. And
no, I know that juggle. Oh, thank you very much for that. So I wanted to have you on here because one thing every business needs is customers or clients.
Yes.
And if you get other things right, if you get your pricing right and your products right and your service delivery right, and you have enough clients, that's it. That's all you really need in a business. And yet so many people struggle to find clients. Yeah. So I'd really like to dig into how that is done and share some tips for anyone listening today. But first of all, I think a good starting point is how do people identify the right client or customer?
So typically, most people start up a business because they can make, do or sell something. And often they do that with perhaps a particular client base in mind. And so I'd say start by thinking about who those people are. Who are the people that you can make something for, do something for, or sell something to? And then don't just start with kind of my favourite ones, it's kind of like, oh, a woman in her mid-40s that lives in the home counties, so she's like this. Well, don't just start with demographics. Start by thinking, what is it that I do that solves their problems? And when you say, how do I solve their problems? It opens up thinking really differently about the type of clients you can serve. I'm a strategic marketing consultant. So instead of saying, I used to go out and go, I can help you do marketing reviews and plans. It was like tumbleweed. And I'd look for people who wanted marketing reviews and plans. Nobody does that. And then I thought, what problems do I solve? And I thought, I solve the problem of people having bad marketing. Why do they have bad marketing? Why isn't their marketing working? So start to flip it like that and say, what problems do I solve for these people? And start to think of them like that. And so you're beginning with problems. And then I always say, think about their attitude to your product or service. Are they the type of people that will go, oh, it's very nice, but I can't afford it? Well, you probably don't want those people. You want people that are going to value what you have to offer. So is it that you're making something that's handmade, something that's craft, something that's a bespoke service? Do they value that? And so then start to think, what's their attitude towards what I'm offering? And before you know it, you've got a much more fleshed out approach to these customers than going, I want all women who are in their mid-40s living in the home counties. Start with attitude, start with the problems that you're solving for them.
And would you then layer onto that sort of commonality? So you'd look at, well, if I look at those people, 60% of them are female or are in this, yes.
Yeah, and then you do what's called the geodemographics of segmentation. Then you start with those geodemographics. You say, right, now I know the type of people whose problems that I can solve. I know the type of attitude they want to have it. Before we do the geodemographics, I would also say things like, right, as a business, where can we physically reach geographically, where can we reach? Do we want to stick to one region, to one county, to one town? So start with that, with what can you physically do? So I'm working with a client at the moment, and they've identified that they can service the UK and the USA, and that's it. And there are huge opportunities for them in other countries, and they're like, we can't get there. We physically cannot help those clients, so we're not going to set ourselves up to fail. So think like that, and then start to think, yeah, typically, what's the typical age? What's the typical gender of these people? And then I will actually go onto LinkedIn and find, a little bit creepy, find photos of these people that I might type in, you know, female business owners in the south of England. Oh, look, here's popped up a picture of Hannah Martin. And I might think, right, let me get to know her a little bit more. What kind of things does she do in her business? And
So why is the photo important? Is there sort of an intellectual kind of exercise in identifying logically, and is there an emotional exercise where you sort of feel like you know this person?
Yeah.
Is that the photo to help with that?
The photo helps with that. I also think it helps because we all take things on board differently. So some people are highly, highly visual, and so it can help encapsulate that when they can visualise that person in front of them and actually see the face in their mind of the person that they want to sell to. Now, I'm less that way inclined. What gets me is all the numbers and the facts and the figures. So I enjoy putting together all of that kind of, 25% of women in my county are more likely to buy from me because of this survey shows this. So whatever works for you, but the photo can really help. And it's getting to really understand them and get into their shoes and build it out. One of the other things that I also ask people to consider when they're building up a client persona, a client segment, is what's their attitude to risk? So this is particularly important if you're a new business, because if you are a new business, you are risky. They don't know you. Can they trust you with their money? Even silly things like giving you their credit card details online. Where's that going? Is that going to a genuine company? Is it going to, how's that been set up? So what's their attitude to risk? Are you a risky purchase for them? So if you're trying to sell in something which for them is a lot of money, that's a bigger risk. Why is that risk? If you have a client base who actually are quite reserved and quite cautious when you start to do your research, then that might tell you that's not the right group for you if you want people who are a bit more willing to give things a go and able to do that. And again, it's getting that understanding, and that's where the photos can sometimes help, where you can look at someone and go, right, they're dressed in a very corporate style. It's clear that they're part of a large corporation. The way that they describe themselves in their portfolio, if they're using language like a solid pair of hands, a proven track record, that's someone that perhaps won't take a punt. Whereas if you've got, so I worked with a client and she specialised in finding the maverick managers in the NHS. She wanted those managers that were disruptors, and you can find them. They're the ones that make the newspapers, they're the ones that win the awards, and they're the ones that will have on public-facing profiles things like innovator, creative. Some of them would even say maverick. And then she went and she became their right-hand woman, supporting them. So there's all of these different things to take into account, but I think the first is what problems are you solving for them? Then what's their attitude to what you're offering, and do they value it? And then there's how much risk are they prepared to take? And then you build up all of those geodemographic factors like where they actually are, age, gender, etc.
And how many avatars or personas or sort of whatever label you to describe it, would you recommend, let's say, a small business? How many should they have? Just one? More than one? And do you also recommend negative avatars?
Oh, that's interesting. So for a small business, obviously, it depends how many you can cope with, is the first thing. I tend to create 3, and that's because by the time you've created 3, you then get a real sense of which one to prioritise on. And then it's not just creating 3, then it's saying, this is the one that is the best fit for what we are doing, or this is the one that we're going to get to easily. And then you can come back to personas. So, for example, there's a model called, it's Rogers' Diffusion of Innovation Curve, and it shows what happens when you launch a product or a service to a market. And the first thing that happens is the first group of people that buy from you are called the innovators. They're the ones that will take a chance. They're the ones that will take the risk. They'll give it a go. Okay, it's a new campaign, it's a new product, it's a new company. And then once your innovators run out, you move into something called the early minority, and they're a little more cautious. They want to see that something's been, they're not the first people to use it or perceived to be the first people. And then after those early adopters, you then start to get into the majority of people. So let's take technology. I am totally, it's called a laggard. I am the last group of people to buy technology. I want it to be tried, tested, witch tested, tech radar tested. My friends have used it, everyone like that. So I've got a very different perception of risk. But what you can do as a business then is you could say, right, we've created 3 personas. We can see that this persona is going to buy from us first because they are less risk averse. They're more up for what we're doing. Once we feel that we have perhaps got as much as we can from that group, now let's move to the next one, which we identified, they're not as fond of risk, or they're a bigger group, or they're harder to get into. It's a longer sell. It's going to take longer to get into because there's more people to engage with. So then you can work through your 3 persona groups in different orders. It could even be that there's a persona group you really, really want, but it's going to take time to set it up and to market to them. It's going to take time for them to come to you. It might take 6 months for them to do their first purchase. So in the meantime, you're going to go for this persona that is going to make a quicker purchase and get some money in. And negative personas. Negative personas are really great. It's basically, I have a list of the type of people I don't want to work with, and there are red flags. So it's things such as the negativity around value and price. For me, a huge red flag, particularly on the consultancy side, is when people say, well, I could do this myself, I have had such bad experiences with clients who have said that to me because they spend the whole time thinking, I could be doing this, well, I could be doing this, I could be doing this, rather than focusing on the value that you're doing. So absolutely do create one. Do create a negative avatar. And as you move through your business, add to it, add to that list. Well, actually, they had this kind of attitude. Well, actually, they said these kind of things. Well, and you'll get to recognise them quite quickly, which saves you and them a lot of time. Because if you're wrong for them, it's wasting their time too.
I guess it's a bit like relationships, isn't it? The longer you go through life, you can sort of spot things people say. You're like, oh, you're going to be trouble.
Yeah, so true.
It's not worth it.
It's so true, yeah.
But so once you've identified your avatars, how do you find people? How do you go out and you mentioned LinkedIn, and obviously there's different types of business, B2B, B2C. Have you got some general advice about how people can go out and find their customers?
So the first bit of advice is research. This is why creating these avatars is so important, because then you can say, right, where are these people hanging out? Where are they actually doing? What are they doing? Where are they engaging? The very first step of marketing is making people aware that you exist. So it's, how do I get on their radar? How do they find me? How do I show up in their space? And you have to try, when you're doing this new, I always say you have to kiss a lot of marketing frogs, in that you have to try things, and some of them won't work. They really won't work. So it might be, I'll give you an example. You might think, great, all of my audience is on LinkedIn. They've all got LinkedIn profiles. Actually, that's all they've got. They've got LinkedIn profiles because they know they have to have one, but that's it. The way to get on their radar is to network, to meet them, to maybe go out and physically meet them, to be where they are. So that's what I mean about kissing a few frogs. And digital marketers, they do this a lot, where they'll build up the persona and they say, right, we are going to spend, £100 on this advert, on this boosted post. Let's see what happens. Let's boost it to lawyers. Let's boost it to accountants. Right, that was interesting. The lawyers clicked through. The accountants didn't. The accountants are our frogs in this case. They're not moving through. So you do have to try things. So start with your research. That will get you so far. And then it is trying things out and seeing how it works.
Okay, so working out where they are and then just experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
How long does it generally, I know this is like such an open-ended question, but it's really interesting because I know a lot of people kind of think that, oh, I found the perfect person. I know my product's right for them. I got my pricing right. I'm going to go out and they're going to buy from me. But how long does it take to win over a customer?
So it depends how long the customer wants to take, is the first thing to realise. Some of this is not in your hands. And for all of us that have ever been under a pressure buy, you know what it's like when someone's pressuring you to buy. And you're thinking, but I'm not ready yet. I don't want to yet. So just remember those feelings. This is where the risk-averse thing comes in and how much they want or need your product and what problem you're solving. Are you solving a problem that is immediate and pressing for them? So we talked about negative avatars. So one of my avatars for the consultancy work that I do is I look for customers that have been through pain. Typically, the pain they have been through is they try to do marketing themselves. It's only got them so far. They've brought in a marketer. It's a junior marketer because that was all they could afford and that's what they thought they could work. They then got frustrated because this poor junior marketer has basically been set up to fail because they're somebody who needs strategic marketing direction, guidance and help, which they're not getting. So their marketing, they're doing their best, but they end up just doing lots and lots of marketing. It doesn't really hit the mark. Then they're ready to bring in a strategic marketing consultant. They've hit that pain point. So, but that can take them 2 or 3 years in the case of strategic marketing consultancy. So it's thinking, well, actually, at what point, how important is this problem to them? How pressing is this problem for them that they have to solve? Is it an immediate need? I'm thirsty. I need a drink. You're stood there with your lemonade stand. I'm going to buy a lemonade. Brilliant. You're in the right place. Ice cream vans are the classic, aren't they? And I remember tipping out of my son's primary school on one of the first days back after lockdown, blazing hot sunny day, ice cream van there. I mean, that's just amazing.
Very clever placement.
Really clever. But it could be that actually their problem isn't, they don't perceive it to be an immediate problem. So in which case it's going to take longer. So you're going to have to keep up a relationship and communicating with them for much longer. In the marketing spaces, one of our members is a financial consultant and they were getting in with a business. The business loved them, wanted to bring them in as a financial partner, and then the servers went down and the whole IT system had to be overhauled. They're now waiting another 3 months for the company to spend that money and get the money back in. And I think however long you think it's going to take, double it, because you're going to need money to keep you going over that amount of time. And that's where a lot of businesses fail when they startups or when they're launching a new product. They don't anticipate how long it's going to take that buyer to buy from them. And whatever you think, if you think, oh, it's going to be 3 months, double it to 6 months and have the money for 6 months at the very, very least. At the very least.
I think that's also why it's really important that people see marketing as a something you do long term. You don't go, oh, I'm selling something, I'm going to do marketing for 2 months and I'm going to get loads of customers and that's fine. And then I'm going to stop marketing, so I'm not going to invest in it. Because I think you need, when you have that marketing journey and that sort of funnel, that you need enough people coming through at different times so that they're ready to drop down. You have a consistent stream of people, don't you?
Absolutely. And also, I mean, your point about, I've launched, I'm going to get you might get a burst of new business at the beginning because of the innovators, or you might have a network set up that are waiting for this product or service or really support you. And then it might drop off. And it is having that pipeline saying, right, what's coming through next week, next month, next 2-3 months. And so the time to panic is if your pipeline is empty, if you can see that actually people aren't signing up for some of the free things that you're offering, your mailing list isn't increasing with people who fit your customer persona, that would be a time to worry if you're a few months in and that isn't happening and you have that glut of perhaps goodwill clients or, when you're new on the market, there is a bit of kind of credibility around that. A great example, we lived in France and some people we knew launched a restaurant and we were talking to our French friends and we said, people are talking about this. And I mean, yeah, they said, of course. Said it's a new restaurant. We're all waiting for it to open so we can all go. And so our friend knew, he was a chef, and I think he's now a Michelin star chef. He knew that those first 3 weeks were utterly crucial and it would be rammed. And he was so panicked because he knew that first impressions last, and that's how it worked there. And he was right. It was absolutely rammed for the first 3 weeks, and then it slowed to a more normal pace. And then he got a sense of what people were after, how much real business he was going to get. Whereas if he'd taken the figures for the first 3 weeks, he'd be like, I'm going to be a millionaire next month. He knew that wasn't sustainable. So just be aware of these false kind of highs as well.
And what would you say? I mean, again, I appreciate that this is going to differ from business to business,
Yeah.
but are there key stages or elements of the marketing journey, or key things that a lot of businesses need to have and consider? You know, for example, email marketing, or maybe a newsletter. You know, like when you work with clients, do you sort of think, well, you know, what are the stages of the journey and what things they might need to have in there?
Yeah. So we always look at the different stages of the buyer's journey, which is based on a 1952 model by a chap called Philip Kotler. So, you know, marketing, we think there's loads of ton, we think it's new, but it's been around a long, long time. And he laid out stages which I've expanded into: awareness, interest, considering, adopting, loyalty. And the very first thing is making people aware that you exist. And again, I'm really sorry, I'm a boring marketer, Hannah. It's go back to those customer personas. How are they going to become aware of you? Where are they? What interests them? Are they people who want podcasts, for example? Do they want to be listening because they're on the go all the time? Are they people that want videos with subtitles because they're sat there on a train commuting, watching things on their phone but with the sound off? At that first stage of making you aware, what do they need and what works for them? And one of the wonderful things is, you know, with Google Analytics and with all of the digital tools, you can see that. You know, you can see actually 75% of my audience are accessing what I put out there on mobile. Actually, they're coming through from Instagram. Go and look at your numbers, look at your data. And then once they become aware of you, you need to think, where am I sending them to next? And that is your responsibility to signpost them to the next piece of content. And that might be blog posts, articles. It might be sign up to a newsletter. It might be listen to our podcast. What's the next stage? And that's where you give them some longer pieces of content. And by longer, I still don't mean War and Peace. I mean, maybe it takes them 5 to 10 minutes maximum to consume that. So maybe an ebook, definitely knowledge articles. Again, think about them. Are they an audience that are happy to read? Are they an audience who want a video? What type of things do they want? And what can you give them to give them a bit more depth of content at this interest stage? They're interested in you. The next bit is where they're considering purchasing from you or engaging with you, or if you're a charitable organisation, donating to you. And this is where they're comparing and contrasting. Why should I choose you over that? Why should I spend my money on this rather than spend my money on this? And at this point, you give them evidence, reviews, references, case studies, testimonials, all of qualifications. I'm a chartered marketer. I make the most of the fact that I'm a chartered marketer. I've got marketing qualifications. I have that on everything. You know, what can you put out there and reinforce that? And then once they've chosen you, woohoo! That's the adopting stage. And then it's saying, right, well, actually, you don't just go, great, you've given us your money, off you go. How do you make them feel welcome? Is that through emails? What do they appreciate? Is it actually, for some people, if you work in a highly niche area, perhaps with premium customers, that will be lumpy mail. That might be sending out in the post physical things, maybe bottles of wine, maybe, you know, nice notebooks with pens, whatever works for your audience. And then the very last thing that we always look at is loyalty. And loyalty has 3 elements. You want them to give you repeat business, recommendations, and referrals. So how do you stay in touch with them? Is it that actually the newsletter that you've created, the interest stage, also works to keep in touch with those people? Is it that they need something separate? Do you give them updates? Do you invite them to... I've got one client who now runs exclusive webinars just for our agency clients. And it gets a decent uptake because it's exclusive and it's invitation only. Do you do things like that?
And what do you see, if you think about people that make mistakes, is there like a common section of that they miss out on?
Gosh, the common mistake that most people make is they stop at awareness. They go, I'm doing my socials, I'm doing networking, I'm doing PPC, I'm doing SEO. It's like, great, where do you send them to? I send them to my website. What happens there? What do you mean what happens there? What happens
They
there?
buy.
They buy. No, they don't buy. So that's a common mistake. Or they might stop at awareness and interest.
Yes.
But there is that stopping. And it costs a lot of money and effort. And you stop halfway through the journey. It's like, I always think of Roadrunner. Do you remember the Roadrunner cartoons where he's literally laying the road as he runs? And what you're doing is you've effectively stopped laying the road, so they just disappear. But what they do is they don't disappear off a cliff, they disappear to a competitor. If you stop putting that content out there that they want, and this is what I think some organisations do, they either stop too early, go, well, we tried that, it didn't work. So it's like, oh, wait a minute, you've only been doing it for a month or two. And again, you've got to go back to your audience. How long are they going to take? Is this a risk-averse audience? What does that mean? So they either stop too early or they keep building the wrong kind of road. For example, it might be they're slogging it out over on Instagram when their audience isn't on Instagram. Their audience are Twitter folk, and you need to be over on Twitter. And that's where your data is really, really important. Keep looking at those numbers.
Excellent. And so how can you tell, like, so if someone's listening to this and so I understand all of that, how can I find out how long my journey is? You know, like, am I a really considered purchase? Am I quite a quick decision? How can they find that?
The key question is, what happens if your customer has made the wrong choice in choosing you? So I used to work in the public sector, and if I brought in a company that was the wrong choice, that was embarrassment. A little bit, I'd feel humiliated. I'd feel professionally that I'd shown I wasn't that big a professional. In other words, it was a big deal. It was a big deal to make the right choice, because if I made the wrong choice, that was my career that was affected. So think, for these people, if you are the wrong choice, if they purchase from you and then they go, oh my God, that wasn't what I wanted, how big a deal is it? Is it a big deal because actually the percentage of money they're giving you that they have is huge? Let's take buying a car for many people is a huge deal because it's a huge wodge of their cash. So if they get it wrong, that's a big deal. Buying a bracelet from a craft fair that costs me £5 at the moment isn't a big deal for me. 20 years ago, when I had no money, that was a huge deal if I got that and then I got it home and it broke. So you've got to think, how big a deal is it if they have made the wrong purchase? And that gives you an idea of how long it will take them to buy from you. Because the more thought they have to put into it, the more they stand to lose if they get it wrong, or they perceive they stand to lose if they get it wrong, the more time it will take them to purchase from you, because they've got to go through that checking you out phase, being comfortable, comparing you to others, and then going, yes.
I think that's why it's important. You talk about the that sort of consideration phase, is that having enough, and that's probably for me the longest part of the marketing journey, because someone might spend 3 or 4 years in that stage, and you have to have content that is engaging with them all that time, because if they're still going to have their problem. And if they drop out of your funnel because they've forgotten about you, they're going to be in a competitor's funnel. So I think for me, that's the big one people to really think about, is that you need to be talking to people all the time with consistent messaging. And that's the part of the journey that might be the longest.
Yeah. I think, again, though, it might be the longest depending what you're selling. So I work with a lot of companies that do B2B marketing, and that is certainly the longest when you're selling to other businesses. If you're a professional services firm, that can be the longest stage. If you're selling, as I like to think of it, something that you can throw. So if you're selling something like a mobile phone or a piece of furniture, that consideration phase might not be as long. You know, if you're selling, say, a piece of furniture, somebody needs something to sit on and they're going to need it at a particular time. So again, it depends on your industry. But yeah, certainly the consideration phase I mean, my longest was 14 years. Somebody came to me and they said, yeah, I really liked what you had to say, so I've kept an eye on you. I went, all right, when did we meet? They were like 14 years ago. I went, really? But they'd gone through all that pain journey that I've described. They're trying
For 14 years.
For 14 years. But it meant that by the time they approached me, they were ready and they were a customer for 2 years. So, yeah, they were really, really ready.
But I think also it comes back to that trigger point. I mean, also, you're not going to spend 3 years deciding on a sofa because by then it's out of stock and out of style.
Yeah.
But it's something that came up when I interviewed James about selling was about trigger points as well. And you mentioned that as well. The example he gave was if you develop a leak in your house, you need a plumber now. And so your decision making journey in that case is fairly quick. But you're still going to go through that thing because you still want to trust them. You still, in this case, that's when we go for recommendations from friends and things that actually shortcut that back part of the journey, don't we?
But also names that we've heard of. So, when we've had plumbing disasters and we've asked for recommendations, the one that we phoned first is the one where we're like, oh, yeah, we've seen their van driving around. Oh, yeah, somebody else mentioned them last year on Facebook. They got a good review, because that it's got that familiarity to it. Whereas if it was like, oh, choose Hannah's Plumbing, like never heard of it. Who are they? Where are they? What are they based on?
You definitely don't need plumbing. Plumbing. It's going to make it worse. But I think, but that's also when, even though someone might make a quick decision, you need to have done the marketing because there needs to be awareness. There needs to be, whether it comes from you or from someone you trust who's seen that person, but the marketing still needs to be done, even though you may be a very quick purchase in a particular moment. Because sometimes with plumbing, we plan plumbing, we might be doing kitchen extension. But marketing is always important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's being out there all the time so that when that need arises, you're first for them to remember. But also when they ask for recommendation, that's that loyalty piece, which loyalty is about repeat recommendations and referrals. When somebody says, can you recommend, you're there, your tip of tongue. They're like, yeah, you need to get this person. They're brilliant. That's what you want to have. And that, again, is achieved by that constant presence. Mm-hmm.
So how much do you think that people should invest, whether it's time and or money? And I know that's, obviously it's going to vary, but obviously marketing is important. And someone who's looking at a small business with a meagre potential turnover earlier on, and also potentially they're going to be investing out of pocket.
Yeah.
What would you recommend? Are there any guidelines around how much time and money you should put into marketing?
Gosh, so that really is the how long is a piece of string. And I have to say, those answers really irritate me. So I'm going to give you a figure and I'm going to give it with lots of caveats. Okay. But the first thing I will say in terms of how much time to put in, I think when you're at the startup phase, you need to allow probably at least 50 to 75% of your time, which is really hard. So I set up a new company in October 2021 called the Marketing Spaces, and it's a membership club. I created lots of content, but with the marketing of that, it's been about 50 to 75% of the time spent. Because when you're in that new stage, it's almost like having a newborn. You have so much nurturing you have to do, and you have to put that effort in. And if you don't put that time and effort and focus in, it's going to take longer. And that is okay. If you are saying, I can't put that much time and effort and focus in, fine, but then accept that the business is going to grow slower. And the implication for that is that you are going to need to invest more money because it's going to take longer for paying clients to come through. Just do it with your eyes wide open. In terms of a figure, first of all, the question is, what do you include as marketing spend? So people might say, you might just want to include things that we will visibly think of as marketing. So your spend on Google AdWords, your spend on things such as Later or Buffer or Hootsuite, so you can schedule your socials, your spend on Post-its, on Post-it notes, or whatever you're using as your physical marketing collateral. Make a list of what you include as marketing spend. I always go as wide as I possibly can, and I will look at things like, well, actually, you've got you hiring a copywriter, you hiring for digital marketing services, who's creating your socials, how much are you paying for those people? And if you're doing it yourself, think of it in terms of your cost as well. I know it sounds funny, it's that time thing. But first of all, how wide is marketing? Is it your Zoom subscription comes under marketing? Does that come under product delivery? You just make these decisions and it'll be different for every single business. Then I would say when you're a startup, a lot of your budget, maybe more than 50% will be on marketing. Certainly for those first few months when you're testing and trying, you're finding which those frogs are, you're getting rid of the frogs, you're figuring out what marketing actually works. Then it should start to settle down because you know what works. It should become less and less, and I would say more than 50% of your spend. And then if you're a business that's already established, I would say at least 10% of your turnover should be spent on marketing. Again, it's really ballpark. That's why I'm so cautious about these answers. It's really ballpark. I said, as somebody who put so much into my marketing budget, my marketing budget looks huge, but it does cover so much. It really covers. I just think, right, anything that I am using to find my audience, communicate with my audience, communicate with my clients, marketing. So does that help?
Yeah, it does. It does really help. And I think it's really easy to see things as a cost when you're starting out and just see money going out and that kind of thinking like, well, I'm going to keep it in or spend it on something where there's a more tangible immediate return, because marketing often is a gamble, and you're putting money out there and maybe you're thinking, I'm not going to see that back for 6 months, but it should be an investment.
It's an investment.
I remember really early on when I was reading about marketing, and I've never been able to find this since. This was quite a few years ago. And I read it's a story of two businesses, and it really brought home the value of marketing to me. And there's two businesses, they start out at the same time. One spends, let's say, 20% of their money on marketing. One doesn't spend. They maybe spend 5 or nothing. But that one that spends 20%, they grow 20% the next year. Yeah. And then they put 20% of that money into marketing. And in 5 years' time, the difference between those two businesses is really significant. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing is people understanding that marketing isn't just money you're putting out there. Marketing should come back to you in terms of business growth and sales and brand awareness and all of those things. It should come back to your bottom line at some point, shouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. It is an investment that should be realised. It is an investment. And it's terrifying. It is terrifying. I think of some of our members at the marketing spaces, and, we've got everything from solopreneurs running their own businesses to charities. You can see the horror in their faces at the thought of having to spend this money, not knowing if it's going to work. But the answer is you don't know yet if it's going to work. And even if it doesn't get the result you want, you will get data. And the more data you get, the more of a picture you can build up and go, right, we're not going to do that again. I did an interview with a lady called Rebecca Newenham, who runs a very successful franchise. And she was saying that at the beginning of her journey, she spent £10,000 on attending an event and exhibited. She said, wrong audience, totally the wrong audience. No one was interested in what we had to say. Tons of money spent. She said, but the lessons we learned were incredible. She said, never been to that type of event again. We now go to the right type of event. While we were there, we figured out what worked well on a stand and what didn't work well by doing tons of research and seeing how people reacted to ours. So the next event we went to, much better. Got the results we need, got the leads we needed, because we went and we were prepared. It was the right event, the right audience with the right stand and the right approach. So don't feel downhearted when you kiss your frog.
That's an expensive frog.
It was an expensive frog to kiss. But the lesson she's learned, and she's now invited to be a keynote speaker at the right kind of event. That's where she's at now, 10 years down the line. And we will make, I always think when I first moved to this area, nobody knew who I was, and I tried all kinds of networking things, and I kissed quite a few frogs and spent money. You're thinking, oh God, I've only got £100 to spend on marketing this week. I've just spent £25 on a networking event that was pointless. And then I think, well, actually, I've got 5 new connections on LinkedIn. I know that group doesn't work for me. I know that geography doesn't work for me. Let me refine. So, yeah.
Yeah, like Thomas Edison, didn't he famously say, I don't know if this has been made up, but, he had to fail 10,000 times before he was able to invent the light bulb.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So can we end on, I always like to end on some really practical tips. And I know you've given loads of brilliant insights and advice, but top marketing tip, if someone wants to be successful at marketing, what's your top piece of advice for them?
Marketing is a business discipline with a structure and a process. Find out what that structure is. Find out what the process is and follow it. It is not magic. It is not fairy dust. It's not glitz and glamour and wow. It is a structure. It is a business process. Understand that, and anyone can master it. Thank God, it's not rocket science. It's not astrophysics. Anybody can find what that structure is, find that process and follow it. And it really, that's what sets apart the people that are okay at marketing from those that are really good at it. They know it's a process.
And I think in the spirit of this podcast about, get rich slow, from my experience, you can find a shortcut and have immediate success, but it's like building a house on the sand, there's no strong foundations there. And I've really found everything that you said, I totally agree, and I've kissed frogs as well. But it's that, putting down, it's the long, slow, putting things in place day after day, week after week, that really yields a result, rather than something that's really quick and I've done that, but can you replicate that result? And can you do that time and time again? It is that slow, consistent work, isn't it?
Slow, consistent work. And I, in some ways, it's like the foundations and the building on sand is a really good point, because when you build something that's solid, there are certain things you have to follow. I remember watching our extension being built, and it was fascinating. 2-metre deep foundations, dug, filled with concrete. I remember my husband going, I spent $6,000 and I've got 2 metres. What have I got to show for it? Nothing. We had nothing to show for it. But we did, because then the next part of that structured approach was to build the outside walls. The next part of that structured approach was they then got the plumbing in. There was a process that these builders were following. And of course, they were adapting it to our circumstance. We had to go an extra foot deep because of next door silver birch tree, which is now subsequently cut. But there was a process that the builders were following, and they adapted it to the circumstances, but it was hole dug first, concrete in first, outside wall first, then the roof timbers, then the skeleton of the interior. That's like with marketing. Find that structure, find that process, follow it. And then you can do magic around the outside. You can kind of go, right, actually, we want to have this type of windows. We want to have these fancy light switches. Let's give this a go. But you're doing it within a structure. And the structure that I mentioned earlier, the awareness, interested, considering, adopting, loyalty is a brilliant place to start. Absolutely brilliant. Make sure you've got something in place every step of that way, and something that's relevant to your key customer persona.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kara. And if people want to find you, where can they go?
They could go to marketingspaces.co.uk. That's where I am. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. And my name is Kara with a K, K-A-I, Kara Stanford, Stanford. You've no idea how much scope there is to get my name wrong, ever spelling it out. So please do find me and find marketingspaces.co.uk. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.